Now we have the print actions save and cancel button that appear. We need to implement what they do, so when things change we can actually do something, but we also need to stop and kind of clean up our code first. We're starting to skip past a few potential bugs and not handle some of the cases. For example, when we load into the page, we don't have anything selected, yet we have this here with a selection. When we do tab between them, if you look down here, the cancel and save button also briefly flash. There's also no way to, when you've deleted everything, see something here at the minute because we still show this, which is all invalid in our UI. You can't save something that's not there and you shouldn't have this. And we want to show a nice splash screen. So really this is kind of a cleanup and almost bug fix video. Let's just work through these issues. The first issue will be this cancel and save button here. We've got the visibility in the stack panel, and you can see it's already telling us there's a problem, that this could be null. And we need to handle what happens when it's null. That would be the issue between changing between these two selections, it briefly goes to null. For that we can simply do a fallback value. So we could set a fallback value of say 1 to keep it visible. And as you tab between, nothing changes. But now if we change it to 0, well, we can see we still have an issue, so there's another issue underlying that. Well, that will now mean when there's no selection, it will be invisible. Let's take a look at the has changed property. There must be an issue there as well. So if we take a look at this statement, the first thing is the save state can be effectively null, a default string. So if this is the case, if there's no save state loaded yet because this hasn't been called, then this is going to evaluate to a change. So it might well be that. So if we also check first if save state isn't equal to an empty string, and then the save state is different. Let's see if that fixes our visual. And it still doesn't. So there must be another issue as well as that. We've fixed that when it's default, it won't call it. We know the state has to be different. And we flagged these with JSON ignores. And I've noticed actually is selected, we don't ignore. So let's just ignore that as well. Let's see if that fixes it. No, that doesn't. So is this getting ignored maybe? Let's just take a look at the generated is selected. The actions print view model is selected. And we can see there's no tag for JSON ignore. So this is still going to get serialized. I think what you do for MVVM is do property colon and then your attribute, and that will then apply it to the actual generated property, which is the thing we want to ignore. And let's just see if that's now fixed it, which that appears to have now worked. So now when we tab between, that brief flicker of the code changing seems to have worked. So that was about 3 different issues. We had the fallback value wrong, so if we now remove the fallback value, or no it doesn't, so the fallback value is not necessarily a problem, other than the fact that it will still show up when this is null. So it is a problem because you can see now there's no selection, but these buttons are visible. So the fallback value fixes that. So you can see now fallback value 0 or 1 is what fixes the initial state. We then had the issue that we actually weren't ignoring the selected property, but the main issue was it wasn't even being applied to the properties anyway, so everything was getting serialized. This one's fine because this is a public property. So this doesn't need to have a property tag because this is actually a public property as it stands. So that's that little bug fixed. And then just one other thing I do notice as well. You can edit these and save, but if you click a new item, you can't save a new item. So you can if you change something, but what if you wanted the new item to be called new item? In theory, when you click for a new item, it should always be different. So you can see we can't change it here. So we need to also flag the has changed to listen out for if it's a new property, it's always changeable. So you can always save or cancel. So to allow for saving of new items, we'll just do another check here that says if it's a new item or it's then got the original checks for if it was edited. That should be all we need now to show the save and cancel when a new item appears. So we go in here now, click a new item, and you can see there's always a save and cancel then if it's a new item, regardless of what's in here. The other thing we want to do is when we first come into this page, we want to pre-select something. So instead of it just being not selected, we want to pre-select the item. If we look at where we load the list, what we'll do here is after we fetch data, because this is the only place that it will get updated, we'll do the selection here, which is as simple as just saying if the print list count is greater than 0, then we'll just get the print list first item and set the is selected to true. And because of data binding, this will all just work for us and the UI should update. And now when we go in, you can see it pre-selects the first item. In a similar fashion, when we delete, if you notice, it no longer selects an item and we're left again in the same situation where there's nothing selected again. This one's a little bit more tricky. If we go to the delete print items, we commonly just remove an item. But what we want to do is now remove the item from the list that is the actual items. This is where we'd also commit somewhere to the services to delete the item. But we also now want to update the UI itself to remove the item from the UI and select the next item. So this is view model specific. To do that, we need to really keep a reference of the index of this item. So instead of doing this, we can just do index equals print list dot index of, and then we'll get the item. And this will now get us the index of that item that we find. We've already checked that we're going to get it, so it doesn't matter that we're doing this. This will always return an index. After that, we can remove the item, so that's no different now. We can just do remove at. But now we have the index. So what we can do with this, if we run the application so you can see, the index is obviously 0, 1, 2. So say, for example, we delete number 1. We'll want to select, if that's gone, you can either select 1 again, which would be this item, or we might as well select the previous item, so long as it's greater than 0. So if we delete 0, the next item we want to select would be 0, because it's the only item in there. Whereas if we deleted another item, say at 1 position, we'd want to select the item before it, I think is the simplest logic. So to do that, all we'll do is the first check. If the index is greater than 0, then we will reduce the index by 1. So this will pre-select the item before the one we deleted. And then after that, if the print list actually has any items left in it, so that's a good check, then we want to just select the one based on the index that we now have. And that will always guarantee that the index is within range, because we're always going one before the previous item, and we're always checking there's something in that list. So if both of them are true, then it simply has to be that this item will exist. We'll put a comment in here as well, is select the item below the deleted one. And now if we go in here, if we delete this, it should select print only drawings, which it does. And if we delete both, it can't select anything. One other issue here as well, the new print items don't delete. And that will be likely because the IDs are not set, which is the add new item here. Let's just set the ID to something for now. This is again temporary code, but we might as well make it work. So just do GUID.new GUID.toString and n. That will give us a unique ID. And now hopefully we can create new items and delete them, which we can. One other thing, once we've deleted everything, we now need to hide this and show some kind of just basic text of what happens. Now, when we have a new item as well, and we click cancel, I think that's where, if it was a new item, we could simply just delete the item because you haven't changed anything. So let's just implement that logic because it's nice and simple. We'll need a new command in here. So we'll do a public void cancel print item. And we don't really need to pass an ID in because it's the selected item. And then in here, we do relay command, and it will be as simple as first, ignore if nothing is selected, which shouldn't happen, but you should always check for it. So if selected print item is null, return. Otherwise, we have it. So then what we want to say is if the selected item is new, delete it. Otherwise, restore from save state. And we'll do the save state another time. But for now, the simple one is if the selected print item, which we now know is something, so we don't have to null check. If it's a new item, We could warn the user, are they sure? But I don't think we will. I think we'll just presume they've clicked the button correctly for now. Then we'd want to delete the print item. Now, you could just delete the print item and pass the ID in, but this would then commit to the back end and it doesn't yet exist. So we only want at the minute to delete from the UI. So this probably wants to be from UI because there is no back end. And then this, where we want to separate the logic, is this would be the bit where we commit to the back end. And this is the bit where we want to remove it from the list. So we'd cut that and say delete print item from UI. And we want to pass in the ID. And we'd have to pass in the ID there as well. So selected print list item dot ID. Now we can have a new method here, private void, delete print item from UI, paste this code in, and then all the checks should work. Index of the first, when it matches the ID, remove it from the list, and then select the one below. So yeah, that logic all makes sense now. And I think that's it. So then we can bind to cancel print item command now. So we'd have the command binding cancel print item command. And I think if we've done everything right there, this will work. Now we go to actions, change these. The cancel shouldn't do anything because these aren't new items. Make a new item, click cancel. There we go, and it's deleted the item. So you can make new ones and just cancel them all. I guess it kind of makes sense. We might even want to flag or color this slightly differently because it's a new item. Maybe make this bold. We could also allow to tab between these items and, oh, there's a bug as well, actually. That's changed. Oh, yeah. So we reset the state every time we toggle in and out, and then it becomes the new default state. Whereas realistically, we don't want to do that on selection change. We want to do it on load. Otherwise, the default state is presumed to be committed. That works on the cancel of new items. I think if it's edited, we want to make the font bold. And we also want to change when we fetch that state to be when we load the items. So let's just do that now. The first thing will be is when we, I think we mentioned this before, but when we load all these items now, we'll run through and update the state. So in fact, we can do it inside of here. We can say select first item, store last fetched database save states, which makes more sense as well. Like so. And then where we were setting the save state on the selection changed, which is in probably here, is it? In here. We don't want to update the state there. And now we should be able to bind to this list, which will be here. And we've got a label and a button. So this label then, we'd want to have the font weight bold, which means the font weight will need to have a value converter. So this can be binding to the property has changed. And then we're going to need a value converter. This will have to be a static resource. And we will make a new folder in here called value converters. Make a new one in here called Boolean to bold font converter. Value converter, control dot, implement both functions, and we don't care about going backwards for now, we just want the convert. So in here we can just say value is Boolean, bool value, and bool value, which is true. Then we want to return a font weight dot bold, otherwise font weight, and this is where the default will just be implied as part of the converter. And then this can be simplified apparently. Oh yeah, that's quite cool. If value is bool and true, cool. So now we can just put this as a static resource in the application, in the app.xaml. So we should just be able to do here, the local do we have? Or in this case, we need the view model namespace now. So XML namespace colon, not the view model, the value converter. So we'll do VC equals write process 3.value converters. Then in here we can now do value converters, boolean key, and then give the key the same name. Boolean to bold font converter. And we should be able to now finally add that to this converter here. And then if that works, we should now get a bold font when it's changed. There we go. So you can see when you change something, it goes bold. And it also stays bold until it's no longer changed now that we don't update the changed events until we're in there. This now allows us to also, say, work between files and make some changes and not have to commit until we're ready. We can then come back in and cancel and save at any point. And then if we try to navigate away from, even say here's fine, because you've still got the page there. I'd say just if you're trying to navigate away from actions, it wants to warn about saving, because at some point you want to warn the user that they haven't committed some saves. So I'd say maybe even when you're tabbing between pages, you warn them that there's a change, and when they're tabbing between these main pages, we definitely warn them. We'll do that separately though. So for now, I think the only thing left is when we have no items, we want this to all fade out and show something else. To do that, we're going to need a new property because we need to know when the list is empty, and you can't just bind visibility to a list, and you don't really want a value converter for doing something so generic of checking when this list is empty. So the goal will be when this general and drawings section, which is here and here, which to be honest we need to merge together now so we can kind of hide them. So let's just first change this grid. So we've got star 30, 1.5, 30, 1.5. So let's just remove all that, change it to a single second column, put another grid in here that's got a grid.column of 2, and then put those two grids inside of there. And then this can now be column 0. This can be column 2. And we need to redefine this grid's grid columns. So column definitions will once again star 30 star. So a 2-column grid. That keeps everything the same, but now we have a single grid here. We can say is visible false, for example, to hide the entire selection. We're going to do opacity though, so we can animate it. And the opacity wants to bind to, and this is where we want to bind it to whether there's any items in this list. So at the minute we have the print list. We don't have anything that says, do we have any items in the print list? So we want one where the print list has items, and that's the property we now need to make. So if we go to here, just make a new property. We'll do a public bool print list has items. And you can see it's telling us it wants to do print list any, which is fine. That's now correct. But with this being an observable collection, this won't change when we're just adding and deleting items. So we can add a notify property changed for here to the print list has items. So if we completely replace the list, this will get updated. But right now, if we run this, we'll find that it won't update when we delete items because we're removing items from the collection. We're not replacing the property. So if we went through here and deleted them, you can see already it's not right anyway. It's not showing anything because it's never been updated. So what we need to do to fix that is after we've made the print list, so once it's been replaced, and again, keep track of where you do this, but this is the only place we should do that. We want to then hook in to the print list.collection changed. And every time the collection changes, we can ignore the two properties if IntelliSense had actually let me do it. And we can then just fire off a onPropertyChanged event manually, and the name of the print list has items. So we're just going to say every time the collection changes, let them know this property needs updating. Update print list has items when collection changes. So now that should work. It might not work on the default. We might have to also do something there, but it should definitely work when we delete items. If we go in now, you can see as soon as we delete one, it then shows correct. And then we delete them all, it hides again. So now we're just dealing with the default state that's wrong. And the issue there is we have the printer profile set, not the print list has changed. I think I just typed that wrong. And now hopefully with that typo fixed, it should work. There we go. So now it shows correctly. You can add items, cancel them, delete them. And when they're gone, this is now blank. When you add a new one, it comes back. That's everything now where we want it to be, except we need just to show something here when it's blank. So when the user first comes in. I think all we'll do for that is add another grid here. So on the same grid column as this one. Well, in fact, it can just be a stack panel. We don't need a grid for this one. We'll put in column 2. We will have the horizontal and vertical alignment as center. And then we'll put in here just a text block with some text as print actions can be used to print drawings, and you can see it all appearing here in the center. Drawings and models with specific printer settings. Do another one. We'll do spacing of 10. And then we'll just want to say, to get started, create a new print action. And then we'll just add another button. What we'll do is just hide this as well for the minute so we can actually see what it's going to look like. We want the horizontal alignment of both of these to be center. And then we'll put a button under here and we'll just mimic the button here, the new print action. So we'll just do new print action, horizontal alignment center, command binding to the new print item command. And then we'll just put a little bit of margin at the top on this one. Just put it all around. Now what we want to do is show this only when there's nothing in the list. So when this list has got nothing in it. We have this property we can bind to, print list has items. So all we need to do is the opacity binding to print list has items. Or in this case, when it doesn't have items, so the invert. And now if we compile and get rid of the is visible false there, we can see here, and when it's empty, this then shows, and when we click, we then get a new item. Let's just run that in the application and make sure we're happy with that now. We go to actions. This is all preloaded, what we presume from a database. This is the fake info. We go around, we click some new items, we cancel them, we can change them and save them, which obviously does nothing at the minute. If they were all missing, we'd have this page on intro, which looks nice and clean, telling you what it's for, and you can click a button here to get you started, and then you'll probably notice that afterwards. So I think that's it for this one. I think the last step on getting this to the point of committing is to just handle, when we're tabbing away, warn the user that there's changes to be committed. And we need to actually do the cancel button and restore for original items. So ones that already exist, when you cancel, you want to set them back to default. And then once those two things are done, we'll implement the save button, which will actually load and save to and from the database. And the last thing I forgot to just say was we've also dumped in the styles for animating the opacity in and out. I've just copy and pasted the same transition from this animation down here, just use that. And I've copy and pasted that into the grid as well and just changed it to a grid selector and a grid styles. Now when we add a new item, I've set them to a really slow 1 second transition, so you can see the difference, but you click in and that fades in and the general settings fades out. And then if we change that now to the normal timing of 0.1 seconds, it's much quicker, but it's that subtle little bit of animation.